We're going to move to the next one. This is industrial rights. This is a session that we recorded earlier. It features Tiff Lynch, Deputy National Chair of the Police Fed, Callum MacLeod, National Secretary, of course, Gemma Fox, Deputy National Secretary Mark Fairhurst is with us on this one as well, National Chair of the Prison Officers Association, Callum Steele, former General Secretary of the Scottish Police Federation, and Lord Hendy, KC. So let's cross then to kick this off with Gemma Fox, Deputy National Secretary. And I began by asking Gemma to give us an overview of what this session is all about.
Thank you, Ian. And I think it's really important to, for a bit of context and to set the scene for where we're at the moment. This has been an ongoing conversation within the Police Federation for some time now, amongst our branches, across our membership. And it comes on the back of what we see as a degradation to police pay over a number of years now, and a desire for there to be a pay mechanism which is fair. And I think it's important that when we reflect on this discussion, we look a little bit at of where we've come from in this recent months and years. Is that in 2021 we withdrew from the police pay review body on the basis of a number of key concerns that we had as an organisation, and I think it was important to say that the independence we feel as an organisation in our open letter to the PRRB chair was a main focus point, is that actually we feel that the PRRB is restricted and the pay review body is ultimately controlled by the Home Office, and that the ability of the remit letter being set and the scope being set by the Home Office is a real key concern of us, because ultimately we feel that there is too much interference as an organisation to that pay review process, and that actually the interference of other government bodies such as the Treasury leads to that interference, and probably puts us in a position where we just don't have that confidence in a system that is supposed to be impartial and independent, and recognising the position that policing is in. I think it's important to say that the research has shown that degradation to police pay. Only in March this year did we have our own SMF, Social Market Foundation, findings that were published, which showed that 17% real terms pay cut since 2000. I think, again, it's really important to say that policing pay has risen at barely half the rate of other average UK employees in the same period. We're an outlier with other protective services and public sector bodies due to our inability to take action. And again, I think we have those shared interests with the Prison Officers Association that are here today with us. And also other comparative groups of protected services workers and public sector workers saw a rise of between 1% and 4% alongside our cut of 17%. So this conversation, I think, as I say, I just wanted to show, doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a sustained period of time whereby we feel that there has been that lack of independence to the process. And I think what we ultimately want to see as an organisation is that two things. I think that, one, the government understand the restrictions and the limitations that are placed on police officers for the risks that our colleagues face on a day-to-day basis, and that their pay compensates that. But secondly, that the principles are there around impartiality, fairness of the process, and that both parties have that ability to have binding arbitration, and that's speedy. We don't want to feel that our officers are just left there while their pay is kind of ultimately, at the moment, we feel, decided by government bodies.
We'll bring in Mark in just a second, Gemma, but it's interesting, isn't it, that every time we speak to a politician on this issue, at conference last year, Priti Patel, who was the Home Secretary at the time, there's been many since then, of course, made the everything is fair, everything is impartial, everything is independent. They could not be more emphatic about that. You're smelling a bit of a rat on this one, though.
Yeah, and I think, Ian, it's really important to say that the research and the figures of that degradation to police pay from the social market research kind of demonstrates that for us. it demonstrates that lack of impartiality. But when we talk about how we'd like to see things going forward, I think it's important to also add that we've had, since our open letter was published to the PRRB chair, we haven't had any meaningful conversation with government of how we can look to make improvements to that PRRB process, or how we could look to be reassured that that independence is there.
Let's bring in Mark. Mark Fairhurst is the National Chair of the Prison Officers Association. On the points that Gemma's been making, Mark, I can only imagine, I don't want to put words into your mouth, that you are sympathising, understanding and probably agreeing with every bit of it.
Oh, without a doubt, we've been subject to an independent peer review body since 2001. Now, an independent peer review body that is paid for by the government and chosen by the government, it's that independent. And we withdrew from giving evidence to them for many years. It's only over the past 3 years since a new peer review body was introduced, new members to that board, that we started to give evidence, because we were seeing real palpable results, culminating this year in the highest pay award for the majority of our members for over 31 years. But saying that, even that pay award was below the rate of inflation, because when we gave evidence, inflation was in double digits. So most of our members were awarded 7%, which doesn't detract from over 6 years of pay freezes, then a pay pause, then pay restraint, below inflation awards, and all the risks that comes with our job, as well as the police. So it's funny, isn't it? Because we are in a recruitment and retention crisis, because most of our people are leaving to join the police, because, believe it or not, police pay is a lot better and more attractive than prison officer pay. So I do really sympathise with everything that our colleagues in the police are going through.
Just to throw in another political cliche, which I think you'll be familiar with, we often hear it come back: it's still a good job, you've still got a nice pension, it's regular work. I mean, that no longer surely can wash with anyone, not with a straight face at least.
Well, it doesn't wash with us. It's never going to be a gold-plated pension, because, let's be honest, we have the powers and privileges of a constable whilst we're on duty, but we don't enjoy those privileges because the police have 30 years of service and can retire on a full pension, or they don't have to work past the age of 60. Our pension age was increased in 2015 to 68, or your state pension age. So most of our new members are working till they're 68. I've got to work till I'm 67 in the most hostile and violent workplace of anywhere in the world. It's not practical, it's cruel. And let's be honest, you don't get a gold-plated pension. Most of our members will either die in service, or there will be a pensioner in poverty when they do eventually retire. So it really does need to be addressed across the whole civil service and public sector.
Gemma, just give us a response to some of those points that Mark just made.
And I just think, reflecting on Mark's position and what he outlines for the Prison Officers Association there, I think it's important, probably what I would have gone on to say surrounding our background and where we've got to at the start, is that actually our branches up and down the country have been asking for our membership now to have a voice in this. Our members now, it's important for us that we scope our membership as to what they see the future of police pay to look like. And on that basis, our National Council have voted that we are now going to ballot our membership on whether or not they wish PFEW to pursue industrial rights for them. And for us, that again focuses on that ability to have a fair pay mechanism with those principles that I've already outlined. And to give them a voice as to whether collective bargaining is something that they wish to have back on the table. So again, we are really keen as an organisation that we take that mandate from our membership, if it's given, and pursue that as a policy position for the organisation.
We'll get a legal position on this as well in a few moments. Lord John Hendy KC is with us, and also from Tiff Lynch, Deputy National Chair of the Police Federation. But let's get that Scottish perspective on all of this as well. Callum MacLeod is the National Secretary of the Police Federation, and Callum Steele, former General Secretary of the Scottish Police Fed and President of Eurocon.
Good afternoon, Callum, and thank you very much for joining this industrial rights session for National Conference. Obviously, you've got an extensive background in policing, ex-General Secretary of the Scottish Police Federation, current General Secretary of the International Council of Police Representative Associations, and the ex-President of Eurocop. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Callum.
No problem. First thing I'm going to ask is probably from a European context, what the sort of landscape is like across Europe in respect of industrial harmony and police officers at this moment in time.
Well, that's probably a very, in fact, there's no probably about it, that is a very salient question. It's little over a year to the day when a joint project that was undertaken by Eurocop with a body known as Euromil, which looks after military personnel, and the European Public Services Union, which looks after 8 million public service workers across Europe, reported on the findings of a 2-year study into industrial rights for police officers, military personnel, and a wide variety of public servants in Europe. Now, it won't surprise you that the basis for that was starting from the premise that the vast majority of those that these bodies represented do not enjoy the same industrial rights as everyone else. So the situation for police officers in the United Kingdom, for your benefit in England and Wales, is largely not too dissimilar to that for police officers across most of Europe, and indeed many other public service workers across Europe also. That study looked at 32 countries. In the overwhelming majority of these countries, police officers do not enjoy the right to strike. I think probably Belgium is the most obvious example that stands apart. And even in Belgium, there are very limited circumstances within which police officers can strike or take some form of industrial action. And even when that happens, the government is able to mandate minimum service levels. So by and large, the situation that frustrates, I know your members in England and Wales, certainly frustrated many of my former members in Scotland, is not too dissimilar to that which prevails across most of Europe.
Well, that's interesting to hear, Callum, and obviously the position we are in is probably been magnified over a period of time from probably below inflation pay awards, lack of recognition of the role of the Office of Constable throughout England and Wales. And obviously we've got a differing model to what they have in Scotland at this moment in time, where we have a police remuneration review body. Can you just confirm what the current position is in Scotland in respect of pay and terms and conditions, what framework you operate in?
Yes, happy to. The situation in Scotland is that the Police Negotiating Board, ironically, the same Police Negotiating Board that all of the UK federations and staff associations were members of, still continues to operate in Scotland. It actually operates at this moment in time under the same legislative provisions that provided for the PFEW to be members of the PNB all of those years ago. And whilst I think it would be disingenuous to say that that system is perfect, in fact, it's a long way short of perfect. It is head and shoulders above, certainly by observation, the situation where you have a pay remuneration review body in England and Wales. And ironically, the wider study that I referred to a few moments ago looked at some of the arrangements that exist for collective bargaining and dispute resolution also, and very obviously by virtue of the United Kingdom not being part of the European framework, it did not cover the UK bodies. But the situation where collective bargaining is not able to take place and there is not access to some form of dispute resolution is probably largely unique to England and Wales at this moment in time, to your very obvious and considerable disadvantage. The Scottish system, like I said, whilst far from perfect, allows you to be in the room with the people that are making decisions on your pay and looking someone in the eye and telling them why you think you are worth X and making them tell you why they disagree with you. It's a very, very powerful position to be in. Now, the pay for police officers in Scotland and the differential in terms and conditions has only grown since the PRRB came into being for England and Wales. And I'm in no way confident that the existence of the PNB in Scotland has, to some degree, contributed to the maintenance of better terms and conditions. So of course, police officers will always want them even better still, but the PNB has allowed for that to take place. Crucially, of course, it allows you to get around some of the more nuanced aspects beyond just pay and look at the wider terms and conditions and how work is undertaken. And in that sense, the pragmatism that can be shown by being in the same room, thrashing out the issues, is definitely better than what you have. And I would wholeheartedly encourage anything that the PFEW can do to get back to a negotiating framework, whatever that might look like, to be pursued.
Yeah, thank you, Callum. I mean, there's definitely, as you quite rightly say, that a frustration around that pay process that we sit outside of at this moment in time after years of degradation of police pay, and there is a necessity for us as an organisation to be presenting the best pay position for our membership. And it is, as you say, very frustrating at this moment in time. But you did mention the fact that sometimes these discussions, although constructive, can be quite frank, can be quite difficult. But from a fairness element, would you suggest that that's more appropriate than having pay awards invariably foisted upon a workforce?
I would say yes, although you could argue that the PRRB system, if it was allowed to function properly without the direct interference from government, could possibly come close to offering something similar. But of course, it doesn't do that. I mean, to some extent, the bottom line is set before the PRRB starts to take evidence with the directions that it receives in the police pay review body, for example, from the Home Office. So having the position where you are able to freely negotiate, recognising that, of course, money and exchequer pressures will exist regardless of what your government looks like, is definitely, I think, definitely a better advantage than simply submitting evidence and people making decisions in a relatively sterile environment where they can be dispassionately removed from the impacts that are going to affect, in your case, 100,000 plus police officers. Being in the room is definitely better. Looking them in the eye is a very powerful thing to be able to do.
And of course, the ability to refuse and re-enter that process, because currently we don't have that within England and Wales. It's obviously on the basis of that review body's recommendations that the Home Secretary decides or doesn't decide, as the case may be, to accept the recommendations. But the ability to refuse, surely, certainly in my view, comes with the role of the Office of Constable and the restrictions that are placed upon police officers and the inability for the likes of withhold labour or have access to wider industrial rights. It just seems unfair to me that you don't have the ability on behalf of the membership, or we don't have the ability on behalf of the membership to refuse at any particular point in time a pay award as it stands and re-enter a framework. I mean, I certainly see, and I don't know if you can comment on this, we have other bodies, public bodies in England and Wales that have a pay review framework, but they're also unionised, and I'm not suggesting that policing becomes unionised. But off the back of pay disputes, they're invited into negotiations with government to try and settle disputes. And we seem to be a little bit of an island in respect of that. Could you perhaps comment on your observations surrounding that?
Yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, given the background that I come from and the role that I performed, I agree wholeheartedly with every single syllable that you've just uttered. The reality is, as we all know, is that police officers occupy a singularly unique position in the employment market. Police regulations in England are no different to those in Scotland when it comes to the absolute right of ministers to determine police pay. And even in our negotiated framework, and says he, when it's no longer his, but even in the Scottish negotiated framework, ministers ultimately have the whip hand and could impose pay settlements. Mercifully, and certainly in the time I was General Secretary of the SPF, that never happened. But I do think that distinct role that police officers occupy has to be recognised by governments. Indeed, it's recognised by the International Labour Organization. Even though the UK is no longer in the European Union, arguably the reach of the European Charter on Social Rights is significantly limited as a result. It's still a signatory to international labour conventions, particularly numbers 98 and 151, which detail the rights to have collective bargaining mechanisms and also adequate dispute resolutions. And even though there are some carve-outs for legislators when it comes to police and armed forces, those are not absolute. And I think there has been a wholesale forgetting of the fact that police officers are different from everyone else, and the government should be reminded of that at every opportunity.
So if I'm a representative body coming to you, Callum, for advice, and I know we speak quite regularly, what would you suggest? How do we rectify this position?
Well, it's not easily rectified. You know, made reference at the start of this conversation to the situation in Europe. It's actually broadly similar across most of the Western world, where the frustrations that prevail in England and Wales just now are experienced elsewhere. The biggest difference, I think, at this moment in time is the relationship. And when you're not in a position to sit and speak and discuss the specifics of the role that you perform with those that govern over you, then that's a significant disadvantage. I don't believe for a minute that either a Conservative government or a Labour government, or in fact, hypothetically, an independent Scottish government would ever be inclined to give police officers the right to strike, and it would hoover up every single penny of reserves that you had in trying to exhaust the courts and trying to make that happen. But using the powers of persuasion, at which the Police Federation of England and Wales was absolutely world-renowned. By some distance, it was recognised as the world's leading police industrial body. Getting back to that situation where you are respected, you are understood, you are known to be the authoritative voice of what is happening on the ground, I think puts you a long way down the road to getting back round some form of negotiating table and getting back a status that you no doubt deserve. But because let's not pretend that at this moment in time, the leadership of policing in England and Wales, or indeed in many other places, is covering policing in glory. Many of police leaderships across the UK and across the world, in fact, are posted missing. And the only people that are doing the advocating for police officers are actually police unions, police associations, and police federations. These things always go in a pendulum. The pendulum is due to start swinging back towards the middle ground. And I think that the time is right, potentially with a change of government coming in the next 12 to 16 months, for you to take advantage of that by showing yourselves to be the respected, proud body that you always have been.
Callum, thank you very much indeed for your contribution today to this conference, and for your continued engagement with the Police Federation. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you to Callum Steele and Callum MacLeod there. Let's get a kind of legal overview of all of this. Lord John Hendy Casey is with us. Lord Hendy, welcome. This seems, whatever way you slice, there's a lot of chaos going on here, a lot of finger pointing, nothing to do with me, Governor territory, it seems.
Yes, there's quite a lot of law involved in the right to collective bargaining. Can I just sort of sketch it out? I think your colleague from Eurocop will be familiar with this, but under the European Convention for Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights has declared that the right to collective bargaining is a fundamental human right, an essential element of Article 11, which protects freedom of association and the right to be a member of a trade union. And we also, this country is also a signatory to and has ratified and is bound by the European Social Charter, which also protects the right to collective bargaining in Article 6. And it was under that provision that Eurocop brought a case which established the right of police officers at European level to participate in collective bargaining. And there's also the International Labour Organization, which protects the right to bargain collectively in Convention 98. Now, against that background of international law, as you guys know, in national law, in our law, police are neither entitled to strike or to bargain collectively. So the question is, assuming that this government remains intransigent, and if the next government, assuming there's a change of government, is not as sympathetic as Mark hopes they will be for the restoration of collective bargaining and the right to strike for prison officers, the question is what legal avenues would be open to the Police Federation to pursue the right to bargain collectively. And there are essentially, there's two possibilities. One is that under national law, we have a statutory so-called recognition machinery. That's to say a union can apply to an employer to be recognized for the purpose of collective bargaining over pay, hours, and holidays. And if the employer refuses, then the union can go to a body called the Central Arbitration Committee, which can order that the employer collectively bargains on those subjects. Now, at the moment, that is an option which would not appear to be open to the Police Federation because police officers don't fit within the statutory definition of those workers who are eligible under that legal scheme. However, in April, I argued a case in the Supreme Court which concerned Deliveroo riders, and we sought, by reference to all that international law that I just mentioned, we sought to say that the national recognition machinery should be interpreted broadly to give effect to those international rights, because the Deliveroo riders, for different reasons, had the same exclusion as police officers, namely they were shut out of the recognition machinery. Now that judgment is awaited. It could be this month, it might be next month. But in the light of that, I think we ought to review, I think the Police Federation ought to review the possibilities of making an application under the recognition machinery. So that's one option, whether it's open or not. I mean, it may be that the Deliveroo judgment doesn't clarify it, but I think it will shed some light at least on the possibility. The other possibility is that we ask the Home Secretary for the right to bargain collectively in place of the mechanism that you've currently got. And if the Home Secretary refuses, then we take her to judicial review on the basis that the law doesn't comply with the international human rights that I've outlined. So there are two options, but as I say, I think it's premature at this point to weigh up which course might be best, but there are options. There is a third option, which Mark Fairhurst knows all about, because we did it in relation to the Prison Officers Association, and that is to apply directly to the International Labour Organization for a ruling. The problem with that is that rulings of the International Labour Organization are not binding on the English government. They ought to be, but they're not, and they are often disregarded. So you may get a favourable ruling, but it doesn't necessarily change the situation in law, in national law. But finally, and if I may, just pick up one point from the ILO, past ILO rulings. The ILO has made clear that if workers are denied the right to strike, such as prison officers or police officers or the military, then they must have some form of collective bargaining. And if the collective bargaining results in a disagreement, a failure to agree, then they must have arbitration. And that arbitration has to satisfy a number of conditions. One is that it's got to be impartial. And that means not simply that we have to take the word of the people that make the appointments, but it means that the impartiality is reflected in the fact that both sides have confidence in the people who conduct the arbitration. Now, that's an important element of impartiality. The second is that the arbitral body must be independent. And that means that it can't be influenced by government sending what it does currently, a so-called remit letter, setting out what the limits of the recommendation of the review body ought to be. That cannot be independent. And the third quality is that it must be binding, which means to say that once the arbitral body has made a decision, it's binding on both parties, including the government. So the government can't, as they've done with the prison officers in the past, say, well, that's all very well, but we're not going to pay you all the award at the moment. We're going to pay another part of the award now and part next year, that sort of thing. And the fourth and final element is that the arbitration machinery has to be speedy. So it can't be delayed, and it must be open to both sides to make an application to it. So I just mentioned those points because you were discussing impartiality and independence previously, and there's quite a lot of learning on that you guys can deploy in your discussions with the Home Office.
Let's bring in Tiv. Lord Henry, thank you for that. Tiv Lynch, Deputy National Chair of the Police Federation. Well, short of becoming a Deliveroo driver, Tiff, which I'm not sure was ever a particular career option, it's complex, right? And as Lord Henry was outlining there are perhaps some options in there, but they are at the moment maybe vague, a sense of impotence. And I would guess that's quite a hard sell for you guys to tell your members and people watching this right now, officers thinking, well, where does it go? Is there any end in sight to this?
Incredibly, Ian, and it's fair to say you've only got to look at the timeline. This dates back to 1919. It's never been a smooth process. We've had reviews, we've had reports, we've had committees. There's legal parameters that also bind all of this together. So it's never going to be a quick process. But it is fair to say that our members, they've had enough. They feel as though we're being held to ransom, where we're expected to do more for less. And it's a bit like the begging bowl. This year, we were awarded a 7% pay rise. Next year, we have absolutely no clue what we're going to get. And all we're wanting is effectively a fair pay and a fair seat at the table to actually negotiate the terms and conditions that are expected as the last line of defence in the public service, in upholding the law, so that we actually get police officers joining the organisation and wanting to stay because they're getting paid fairly.
And do you sense, Tiv, I mentioned it was, it's clearly quite a hard sell. There's a lot of rank and file officers who are very frustrated, even if they're not necessarily pointing the finger at people like yourself, but there is that sense of, what can possibly happen to at least see some light at the end of this tunnel? Is it going to be a change of government? Does that have to be the case? Is it, more legal hearings? What do you sense, sort of in layman's terms, are going to be the options in 12 months' time, for example?
This isn't going to be sorted in 12 months' time. We're now entering a roadmap of a lengthy process. And this is where we have to manage the expectations of our membership. This is not going to be a quick fix. And actually, rightly so, we are getting the finger pointed at us as the Police Federation, because ultimately our members come to us wanting that negotiating, wanting that consulting. And sadly, when we're actually trying to do that, the government aren't listening. So what we now need to do is obviously manage the expectations of our membership, to give them the information that's available to us and to inform them of what we're doing at every stage. And this forms part of it, actually, because with the vast majority of our members now very, very young in service, they won't remember the previous ballot in 2008. They won't remember what the Edmund Davis review was all about. So we need to inform them so that they can make an educated opinion. And we need to cascade all of that. There needs to be member engagement. That's two-way. So we'll be expecting our local branches to actually go out there and have the face-to-face meetings. There'll be lots of written information that's coming out to them. We want to be as open and transparent as we possibly can, so that actually we bring the membership with us.
Let's do some summing up on this then. And Gemma, give us your response firstly to what Lord Hendy had to say there. You know, there are some potentials here, but they're really not that clear at the moment.
No, and I think, I mean, it's really welcoming for us to hear those views. But as I say, first and foremost, we need to have that mandate from our membership that this is something that they want the Police Federation now to seek on their behalf. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing that I would say actually reflects on some of the comments made by Lord Hendy, but also by Tiff, is in relation to some of those principles. We keep hearing them in different reviews, in different parts across history. And actually, I reflect now on the Edmund Davis review. And actually, I would say it's as much relevant today as it was in 1978. And the reason I say that is because the Edmund Davis review said that there should be a system that's promoted whereby police pay is determined through a collective bargaining process. And that is what we're asking for. There are a number of principles, even in that review, which again reflect some of the comments Lord Hendy has made about the ILO, that firstly, it should command the confidence of everybody within the service. And as I say, at the moment, that is what's lacking, certainly with our membership. Secondly, it should take into account those limitations placed upon the officers and the restrictions that they have. Which again is still relevant. And thirdly is that speedy arbitration. So for me, I just wanted to kind of say that actually there are a number of key points whereby police pay has been reviewed over the years. When we look back at the history of why we as an organisation were set up, and Lord Hendy sets out some of the law, that actually it's all the same key principles. So for us, it's really clear the government need to take on board and take stock of those principles and actually understand the perspective that we and our membership are coming from. But as I say, first and foremost, we need to get that clear mandate and direction from the members.
And let's get some words as well, some final words from the remainder of our panel. I'll ask you all to be brief if you could. And Mark, not just from a prison officer's perspective, but the wider perspective on all of this, where do you think this story will be in 12 months from now?
An important point to remember for all Police Federation members is this is an extremely lengthy process. We've been campaigning for our right to strike to be restored since 1994. We still haven't been successful. We've been asking for collective bargaining ever since we realised that a pay review body wasn't that independent since 2001. That still continues. So please be patient. It is a lengthy process. And as a member of the Police Federation, get involved and support your National Executive Committee and your national officials. Get in touch with your local MP, campaign. If they want your vote, they're going to have to give you what you need and what you desire. So back the people at the top of your union, of your federation. Keep campaigning, and whatever you do, never ever give up.
And Lord John Hendy, I know you haven't got a crystal ball, but where do you imagine a year down the line it might be a change of government by then? It might not be, but what do you sense the next 12 months looks like?
Well, I think we'll have a clearer picture of what legal routes are open to the police federation, and we can then evaluate whether we think it's worth the effort and the cost risk to pursue them. That should be clear relatively soon, I think. We'll also be clear, of course, what the next government is going to look like, what sort of a majority it has, and how susceptible it is to pressure from the Police Federation. And in that respect, I emphasise a point which is non-legal but blindingly obvious. The bigger the vote in favour of the restoration of collective bargaining rights in your forthcoming ballot, the more force your arguments are going to have with government. And that will be the best way to restore collective bargaining as it should be restored. But then there'll have to be conversations with the government about this.
And Tiff, final word from you, if we can. What's your message from the Federation's perspective to serving officers watching this right now?
patience for now. We are doing everything that we can to get the right result for our members coming after me. We will get the clear mandate from our membership, and we will do everything in our power as the executive, as the National Board and as the National Council to actually get fair pay. And the National Council will be doing everything that they can to ensure that that information pack and that two-way engagement continues up and down the country. And we'll be hearing from a number of National Council chairs to tell their members what they'll actually be doing and their thoughts on the ballot ahead.
Police Federation of England and Wales recently decided to work towards balloting its members on the issue of industrial rights. We will be working towards a significant piece of education, setting out the detail of the industrial rights and what this means for our officers. This vote will be of great significance as it will give members a true voice in order to shape our direction in this important vote. The main driver for this vote has been the lack of a truly independent pay review mechanism, which has stacked the cards against equitable and fair pay rises. Voting in the forthcoming ballot is an essential way for the members to have a voice in whether the Police Federation should seek industrial rights for officers and in an attempt to better the conditions and terms of their employment. It is really important to note that this is not a vote to actually take industrial action, but it is one where members can direct the Federation to trying to seek this option. Of course, we understand there may be divided views when it comes to industrial rights within policing, and therefore it's really important that we hear your views and that you direct your staff association whether this should be pursued or not. I urge you all to please take the industrial rights ballot seriously and cast your vote when you're asked to do so. Your participation is not just a reflection of your commitment to your workplace and fellow workers, it's a vital step towards what you want from your federation.
Police officers in England and Wales have been badly let down by the current system that determines our pay and conditions. A 17% average reduction in our real terms pay since the year 2000 is nothing short of scandalous. And at the moment we have no real recourse, no seat at the table to negotiate with the government, with chief officers around our pay. That's what needs to change. And this ballot gives us all, across all the 43 branches, a powerful opportunity to change this, to make our voices heard in the corridors of power in this country. So let's make it happen. Let's come together. Let's deliver an overwhelming turnout and let the voice of the membership be heard.
Hello, Steve Kent, Chair of South Yorkshire Police Federation. We at South Yorkshire Federation and our colleagues in Region 2 have been absolutely passionate now for at least 4 years for officers to have a say, an informed say on industrial rights for police officers. It's absolutely important that following a backdrop of neglect and attacks on police terms and conditions that we actually start to have a voice and actually have a stronger voice and with some clout behind that voice going forward. Conversations around industrial rights may have even already had a positive effect on the pay rise that was given this year, although I want to make it clear that wasn't enough. It's absolutely important for me as chair to go in to as many officers as I can in our force, which I've started proactively doing, and actually giving them some real information and engaging with them to try and get them ready for this vote that is going to come hopefully early in the new year. This is a revolution really for police officers to actually have the right to actually have a say on their future going forward. So I would really encourage all of you out there to engage with the process and to have conversations with your colleagues up and down the country to make sure as many people as possible can have a vote in this way. Thank you.
It's important that our members get involved in this ballot when that comes out, because this is one of the most unexplored areas of our terms and conditions of the modern time. As a local branch board, we will be getting involved with the membership to give them the information that they require to make an informed choice about this ballot. But my urge is that people get involved.
And Gemma, just give us a quick response on what Tiff just said.
As I say, it's really important that our membership, as I say, engage, come out and take part in that ballot. The only thing that I would just say as a national executive is that we just want to remind our membership of the legislation that is out there. We need to make sure that we are fully appreciative and understanding of that legislation. We need to remember that we are a public service. We do need to uphold those standards, and it's important that, as I say, we do not breach any legislation in regards to disaffection. I think it's important that if any of our members are unclear about what they can or can't do, that they seek the support and guidance of their local federation branch to have those discussions. And I'm sure our National Council will be more than happy to engage in those conversations and to give that reassurance to members. But then, as Mark also alluded to, is the patience element. We just need our members to be patient with us at the moment and work with us on those next steps. But again, I just think it was just important, Ian, that we just remind our membership that there is legislation that does govern what we can and can't do, bearing in mind our situation, our unique situation. So it's important that that is respected.
Gemma, on that point, thank you. Fabulous panel. This certainly won't be the last you hear of this particular debate and conversation. Thank you to Gemma Fox. Thank you to Mark Fairhurst, Lord John, Hendy KC, and Tiff Lynch.